So, on Connections Radio now, we're very pleased to welcome somebody who we see quite frequently, in fact, at our business lunch clubs, and we've spoken to numerous times on Connections Radio. That's Olive Pellington. Now, Olive resides in Birmingham. We're talking to Olive via the landline today. Olive's a life coach for teens. Olive, how are we finding you today?
Very well, thank you. Very well indeed.
The sun is peeping through the window at you, which is great. Just to remind our audience again, you're a life coach for teens. We've heard of life coaches for older people, but you do a similar thing for youngsters. I mean, what does that entail exactly?
Yeah, sure. I do exactly the same sort of thing. If you think about teens, they're just mini adults, really. Same problems, different place, different time.
Same problem, but you have to deal with all the hormones and everything, which can't be easy.
Yes, all the hormones that are raging and surging, but yeah.
Okay, now let's talk about your focus today. You want to talk about how the latest coronavirus pandemic is affecting school children and what they're basically doing or maybe not doing while they're at home, because, of course, all schools up and down the country around the UK have been closed due to the coronavirus. What exactly are they getting up to? Are they following a fairly rigorous regime at the moment? Are they still doing schoolwork at home?
Well, yeah, that is the idea. They should be. So the majority of schools, in fact, I would probably say 99.9% of all schools have sent children home with work, whether that's on paper or online. Education should still be continuing in theory, yes. Okay.
What about the exam process? Because, of course, this time of year we're building up to the various exams, aren't we? How is the current crisis impacting on the preparations for exams?
It's had a huge impact because, as you know, or probably, you know, people out there do know, I mean, we were just in the throes of starting SATs. Kids were having their mock exams for their GCSEs, others preparing for their A-levels. And when the coronavirus came about and we had all of those notifications from the government and schools were shut down, they also said that exams were cancelled. So there is a huge question mark over what's going to happen with that now. The government haven't said anything else. The teachers in schools don't really know what they're going to do and how they're going to go about giving students their grades for, you know, for the next academic year. For example, those who are supposed to be doing their GCSEs this year and going up to colleges to do their A-levels, they're going to be given a grade, but we don't know what that grade is going to be like and how it's going to be formulated. And the same goes for those doing their A-levels.
Some schools are remaining open, aren't they, for key workers, critical to the response programme?
Some of those schools will be open, as you say, for the key workers and those who are deemed to be in need of care throughout the day. So schools are open. There are skeleton staff running those sessions. Some schools are able to run lessons that are age-related. Others are having to put groups together. It all depends on where you are in the country and how big or small that school is.
How much is this impacting, Olive, on the mental side of school children? Because, of course, we're all affected by what's going on. Adults being brought down by this in terms of their mental approach to this whole outbreak. How are children coping with this?
Yeah, and it's really, really hard to say, Glenn, because it's a huge, huge worry and a huge concern, especially for some of the parents that I've spoken to as well. You know, school provides more than just a learning environment. As you know, it's a very social place for students to be, very aspirational place in some cases for students to be. So how they're coping at home, the environment differs from family to family, from home to home. So again, only time will tell there, but because we are on lockdown and, you know, we've only got an hour's worth of exercise, is it, to actually leave the house, I think it will be very difficult for some children to cope with that and not have the freedom that they used to.
When you go into schools and you coach children, what are their main concerns, would you say?
Yeah, I would say a lot of it is down to anxiety and overwhelm with the workload that they have from schools when it comes to doing their exams. But now that the exams aren't there, it's going to be a case of, right, what do we do now? So the anxiety isn't coming from the test itself, but it's coming from the lack of direction then for education.
Presumably there's going to be a period of catch-up, though, when we all do get back to normal eventually, which will happen. There'll be a period of catch-up where when they go back to school, when the youngsters go back to school, little Jimmy down the end of the classroom is going to be maybe not as far advanced as Rachel up the front of the class. All students work in different ways, don't they? Their workload, what they do at home in terms of homework. Some are very keen, some just let it go. There's going to be a huge period of catch-up, isn't there, when they do go back to school?
Oh, yeah, I would agree with you. Yeah, they're a huge catch-up because, again, I think we're going to see, it's almost like do you remember the game of steeplechase?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it is going to be a case of that because those who are very disciplined, those who do like to work and they'll dive into any sort of education, I think they'll do well throughout this because, again, they'll be able to explore the things that they've always wanted to, that the classroom environment perhaps didn't have time to allow them to do. Whereas those who lack that discipline and are unfocused and need that classroom environment to keep them going may well take a back seat and then fall further behind. So I think when they get back to school, depending on how families treat this situation, you'll either have humongous gaps bigger than they were before, or you'll find that some of the children who were finding things difficult may well have advanced just simply because of that different learning environment.
There will be periods, won't there, when children are working at home doing their schoolwork where the parents won't know about certain things. The children will be opening up their textbooks and some parents might just look at it and go, well, I haven't got a clue. How do you get over that problem?
Glenn, you would be surprised with the number of parents who actually are saying that, we're not teachers, how are we going to do this? And yeah, I mean, in some cases, it will cause frustration. I'm not going to say it might. I think it will cause frustration because, again, having both people, both the student and the adult, parent and child, being thrown into this new way of working, it is going to rub and cause sparks. But at the same time, I know that schools are making teachers available online for students to be able to go in and, have contact with online to be able to sort out some of those problems or things that they're finding difficult. I know the majority of schools, again, have given homework that needs to be handed in. How they actually manage that and make sure that the students are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Again, there is no one big answer to that. I think that's going to differ from school to school, and how they emphasize students actually handing in the homework, I think, is going to differ from school to school. But, I do feel for the parents because it's not something that they're used to. I think they're going to see another side of their child that they've never seen before, and that's both in the positive and the not so positive. But also, I think for the students too, I think they're going to see a new side of their parents and perhaps have a new respect for what it is that they have to be responsible for in the home.
We're having to adjust a different way of life, aren't we? Yes. In terms of distance learning, you mentioned that, Olive, about learning online and distance learning, having a teacher maybe sat in front of the webcam and a number of children on the other end. Does that work, do you think? I mean, there are distractions. They pick up mobile phones, start texting and contacting their friends while distance learning is taking place. Do you think that actually works?
Yeah, I think for the, as we were talking about before, I think for the more disciplined students, I think that can still work. Because, before the school closures, a lot of students already had contact with additional tutors, for example, myself included, I was one of those. And a lot of us tend to do that tutoring online. And it works quite well. But again, it's there to bring another facet, if you like, to what they've been learning in the classroom. So I think for those particular students, I think it will work well. But you are quite right. There are students out there who, like I said, perhaps didn't have the focus they needed, even within the classroom environment. So what's that going to be like in the home environment? And I think that's where a lot of the concern is right now. How do we encourage the students to keep going with their schoolwork, even though the incentive of having to work for an exam isn't there anymore? One thing we've definitely got to look ahead and look forward to is, okay, school might have stopped right now, but time hasn't, which means that kids are going to be growing up. They're going to want to get into work positions later on, whether that's their own businesses or whether they go and work for a company, and who knows what those companies are going to be like right now. They can be what it is they want to be today to help them get into a better tomorrow, if that makes sense to you. So the ones, for example, who are looking to go into work, well, there's got to be a sense of discipline when you go into that job. What better way to start now when you have to manage yourself? It's key skills like that I think we need them to really be aware of, and it is something that they can control now whilst we're off school, doing the schoolwork, maybe doing, some extra investigation, maybe even doing some projects of their own that keep their interest going, because all of that is education. It's not necessarily just the paperwork that the school want to have handed in, or that online class that, they want the student to attend. There's a lot that they can be doing education-wise within their own home environment.
And during this particular critical time where we're all sort of battened down in our homes during coronavirus, it's critical to have some sort of format to your day, isn't it? Get up at the same time as you would when you go to school, right. Have your breakfast, sit down, do your work, break off for morning break, have lunch, afternoon break or whatever, and then finish at whatever time you finish school normally. So it's critical that parents and carers look after that format, isn't it? That sort of structure of the day.
Yeah, definitely. Structure, I think, is key to this. And you say there, about following the school day. Some kids are going to be great with that because they know that come 3 o'clock, all right, that's it. School is over. I can now do whatever I want to do. And some kids can cope with that. Others, because they're at home, it's not the school environment. They're not going to be able to see it in the same way. So they might want to break up the day differently, but to have a routine that enables them to have the education, to have the time to play, to have the freedom that they need within the confines that we have now. All of that is all right as long as it is on a schedule of some sort, sure. So that they know what's coming next, they know what they're responsible for, and they know when they have the freedoms to do the other things that they like doing. Okay,
so for somebody who's a life coach for teens then, Olive, what would your advice be to students in this particular time when everybody's at home? What would your advice be to them?
Yeah, well, I would definitely stress to parents, this is a time to encourage your children, rather than your students. I always refer to them now, to encourage your children to think about what it is they want in the future. And we don't know what that future looks like, but we can definitely put our own stamp on it. So have a talk to them, figure out what it is that they want to do in the long run, and find ways that they can start to investigate and start to build that now. For the students, I would say a similar thing. What is it that you are interested in? What's going to keep you moving forward? Because at the end of the day, if you don't have that GCSE the way that others have had it, you've now got to prove yourself practically rather than academically. How can you start doing that now? What can you use around you? What can you get involved in right now that will help you to build those personal skills that are going to turn into employability skills?
Great advice. If anybody wants details about what you do, Olive, give us your website details.
Sure, they can go ahead and go on to ovpcoaching.co.uk. I'm also hoping to have a webinar within the next couple of weeks. So it will be in April. I'm hoping the 16th, but I'll be putting some more information about that. So if they go along to the website, if they go to ovpcoaching.co.uk/webinar, they'll be able to find out all that information there.
Olive Pellington, life coach for teens and, of course, in charge of OVP Coaching, ovpcoaching.co.uk. Thank you for joining us on Connections Radio today, and take care during these uncertain times.
Thank you, Glenn.